Hello, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations about Culture, where myself and a few of my friends get together and discuss nerdy things. Just a reminder, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to Seriously Pointless Conversations YouTube channel, or you can find us on your favorite podcasting apps. Thank you for your support. Without you, none of this would be possible. Thanks for coming by. Now let's get into the episode.
Do not show me those videos. I will not sleep.
Kelly's mad at me now, isn't she?
Yes.
That's what I figured. It's not your fault. It's my fault for showing you, and then
Of course it is.
And then you have to share this. That's why I told
She knows that I can't control myself, so
so it's
it
my
must
fault.
be the people around me whose problem it is.
You sound like Jackie. It's just like she'll say that. It's like, why do you guys do that? And I go, because it's like you find something that's so just disturbing. We have to share it with the other people.
It must be shared.
Girls don't do that. Guys totally do that. I'm like, this is the most gross and disgusting thing I've ever
That's why guys are like, hey, take a look at this giant dump that I did.
Yeah, you're like, look, it doesn't fit the toilet. They're like, oh god. That's
And
exactly.
girls are like, I'm just gonna flush my shame. Hide it from the world.
Exactly. We don't hide it. We're like, that
We
deserves a
embrace
gold. That needs a gold star and a plaque.
Exactly. That's one of the best South Park episodes ever.
It is true. Are you on number 2? I am number 1. Remember that
It's
one?
like, you've always been a number 2.
Oh god.
Just a number 2.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Seriously Pointless Conversations about Culture. The seriously pointless conversations that we have about culture and nerd information. I'm back here again with James again, and we're going to be hitting the second half of the Red Alert franchise. Hopefully, this doesn't end up being a three-parter.
Hopefully we'll stay on topic this time.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try seriously because we are bad. I don't know if you guys have figured this out. Like I said, we get seriously sidetracked about the most random junk ever.
I'll take responsibility for the last episode. That was my fault.
I mean, I don't care. You can, but I'm a cohort. I'm definitely a cohort in that whole situation. So, yeah. But anyways, so like I was saying, this is going to be the follow-up to our last episode, which was all about Red Alert 1, which was the Westwood Studios groundbreaking RTS that was released in 1995. Now we're going to be following up with the Red Alert 2, which is this is going to be the successor to that, which was released in October of 2000, and it actually was like its predecessor. It was full of all these now famous full motion videos, like we talked about a little bit earlier. And like I was saying, they had all they still had the amazing green screen. You can definitely tell that they upped the production quality a little bit.
Yes.
Now that it's 2000, they were probably mixing a little bit of blue screen in there a little bit. I don't know. But since it was the first one such a commercial success, they really kind of like decided to not pull their punch this time, any of their punches. I noticed, which is why they really doubled down on the weirdness, which you can kind of see with.
It was wonderful.
with the expansion. Yeah, you can kind of see. So, do you remember anything about the first one? I just want to get your second game at all.
Second game, is that the one where they introduced like the Chrono Troopers for the Allied forces, or was
No,
that the third
that's
one?
the third
3.
one. That's the third one.
Okay,
So
for
this
2,
this one is all about the
where they had
the
Yuri.
psychic,
the Psi units.
the Sai. They were like they doubled down on that weird junk, and I'm just like, this is amazing. So
Yes.
yeah, like you said, they introduced a character called Yuri, which we'll go a little bit more into that. But he is basically like a I guess you would call a chancellor, or basically an advisor to the Russian premier at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he is just straight up got psychic abilities essentially.
Yeah.
But I mean, they don't even like try and downplay this. He's got like a metal helmet like that covers half his head.
He's like a 2000s version of Rasputin, instead of
Really,
of a crazy magic monk, he is a psychic soldier. I mean,
and he's even got the little like emblem on his forehead.
exactly.
Too.
They play up the kind of mystic psychic angle.
Absolutely.
It's good.
It was just it brought like I said, it brought everything to the table that I was hoping for, and it just dialed it up to 11.
Yes.
And like I said, so they actually had the expansion, which is called Yuri's Revenge, which is kind of a foreshadowing of what happens in the game a little bit. It comes out in 2001, and that is, like I said, it just comes fully packed and ready to rock whenever it comes into the gameplay. So this was hailed as a critical and commercial success for EA, which had acquired Westwood Studios. I believe it was around the same this earlier in the year. So more than likely, Westwood had this kind of idea in development.
Probably mostly finished, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, close, yeah, probably. I don't know exactly what part of the year that EA took over Westwood, but obviously they probably had the storyboard set up for it. But with EA's, powerhouse behind it, all these extra groups to work on it, they really could probably able to push this out pretty quickly. So obviously, like I said, it was a commercial success. It was a little less well received than the original one. It actually gained an 81% over most review sites at this point. There were quite a few more review sites out there, like we were saying in the last episode.
And there was a lot more competition for the RTS space. Like you mentioned StarCraft. StarCraft came out and that took over like a storm.
Absolutely. Well, you had, I don't know if it was, I think Warcraft 2 had been out for a little while.
Yes.
StarCraft had been out for a while. But this time the Total War franchise had been out for enough time. And they actually had some offshoots. I believe they had...
And didn't Rise of Nations even come out?
Yeah, Rise of Nations
that was
out.
I have just after Red Alert 2, I think.
And the Civilization franchise had already started pushing off. That wasn't an RTS, but still it had that... It still was in that realm of like a strategy game.
All the same type of players, because I mean, until online multiplayer became a thing, these two genres were not so different.
No, not really. I mean, it pretty much came down to, do you want real time or do you want turn based?
Exactly.
That's really the only difference that you come into, and some of it had a few more nuances and things like that. But it was yeah, like you said, they were very close cousins.
Yeah.
So they weren't kissing or like that. So, anyways, I'll stop with the bad jokes. So, anyways, it just kind of jump off that commercial success that they had. They sold so many of these. By 2006, so roughly in the 6-year period, that's usually how you can gauge how well a game is done back in the early 2000s. They sold $26.9 million dollars worth. It's USDA, or sorry, USD, sorry, not USDA, not US Department of Agriculture. You don't worry about that. Sorry, it's the Midwest coming out of me right there. And I'll start talking about cattle and pigs if you want the share crop this year. But anyway, sorry. So after we come back and they sold that much, so obviously it was a huge success for EA, which I think helped platform so many of the other games, push their other games forward, because this was a huge hit for them at the time.
Definitely.
So I mean, without them, you wouldn't have. Without this, you wouldn't have had their acquisitions of so many other major franchises. Like I believe, who else has EA taken over? I know they do a lot of the Madden series, a lot of the sports franchises.
They hit a lot of the sports series now,
which are all the big ones. But I mean, you have a lot of the other ones, like you have Dragon Age.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to think of anything else just coming off the top of my head. But you wouldn't have them acquiring a lot of these other studios if they didn't have some of these little bitty incremental successes at the time. So.
Yeah, they had some really big successes right when games were becoming mainstream.
Which I mean, this was the time, like you said, in the early 2000s when video games were becoming popular among the general public, and it wasn't such a niche anymore.
Exactly, because I mean the arcade scene was huge, but home gaming had been kind of a pretty nerdy, isolated thing that just people did. And this is where it started becoming more of something people would actually do and talk about with each other.
And well, I mean, and you think about it, without going into huge video game history, I mean, you had things like the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo,
exactly,
or affectionately called the Famicom system, But you have these things that enter into the home setting, but you got what you bought, and you couldn't do anything with it unless you were. Unless you were technology, based job, you had a technology-based job where you could change the circuits and things like that, and upgrade it. Which actually, that's how some of Nintendo's properties came to be, which is a huge, cool story, which we can get into in another episode too. I'm laying groundwork for so many episodes for us here. So, but so that's why the PC had a unique market, because you could, at this point. I mean, this is the things I kind of learned from your dad, especially working in IT, learning that you can augment these computers and to do what you want with them. It didn't have to be what you bought from, the Best Buy down the road. You can go in and buy your own parts and put them together, and you can make these things be able to run anything you want.
Which is something common to do now, but I remember back in the day, I made a lot of money in high school just repairing computers for people. Because, I mean, these were $800, $900 machines, which at the time was a tremendous amount of money. It still is. But back then it was a lot more. And people would just throw them out. Yeah. Like if they got slow, if they thought it was broken, or if they couldn't do what they wanted, they would just throw them away and buy another one.
Which, that's unheard of.
The idea of like repairing and upgrading was a new concept.
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of the same principle as like somebody owning a car. If you put a lot of work and money into a car, you're not just going to throw it out. Yeah. You're going to try and fix the problem. It's like these, what I call them gearheads. They just get ratcheted into like whatever car they're working on, and they will work on a problem as long as they can until they figure out the problem. It's the same kind of thing, I guess, with computers.
Well, exactly. And this is why when you got to Windows 2000 and Windows XP, things got a lot more plug and play.
Absolutely.
If you ever worked on
a lot easier now.
If you ever worked on a Windows 95 era machine, it's quite difficult to make the hardware talk to each other and agree with each other. Setting up like a proxy. Did you ever do a proxy for dial-up internet?
Yes.
That takes a solid day.
It was. I remember us trying to do it at your house, and I was just like, "This is awful."
Yeah, and putting in new hardware involved having to go back to the BIOS and change all the settings, and it was a mess.
You can still do that.
You can still do that. It's still a good skill, but I mean nowadays it's as simple as just going out, buying a drive, and just plugging it in, and it works.
I mean, you literally buy the component, drop it in your computer, and a lot of times it'll auto update itself.
Yeah, you can go to something like PC Part Picker, and you can make sure it's compatible ahead of time. But
dude, that thing has been a lifesaver. Even some of the guys that work there are like, "Oh, I don't want to buy all my own parts." I go, "I promise you, you do this, it'll cost you $800 instead of $2,000."
Exactly.
I mean, all it takes is your time and effort, or you can bring it over to me, and we can put it together, and we'll have fun. We'll drink a couple beers while we do it. We
built quite a few PCs.
Oh, dude, that's a whole other ballgame. But anyways, so kind of like before we get sidetracked again. And we promised we wouldn't, and we've lied already about it. So that's one strike on us. Shame on us once. Got it. We'll leave it there.
What were we talking about anyway?
We were actually talking about the Red Alert. So due to this commercial success, it was a lot of mainly due to them taking these basic gameplay things that they had in the original game. And also they kind of built it up and on a little bit over time through the Command & Conquer series too. Yes. As well. So just like with Red Alert 1 and Command & Conquer, they had all these basic the basics in the gameplay were the same. Mm-hmm. You build your base, you gather your ore, you go destroy your enemy. Yeah. Simple. They kept that down, but they did a few enhancements, which was really kind of an interesting thing. And you notice if you replay them, they weren't groundbreaking, but they were like niceties to have. That's why I kind of always look at Red Alert 2 as a nice successor to Red Alert 1, and it kind of was a good primer for Red Alert 3, because Red Alert 3 is my favorite Red Alert of all of them, in my opinion.
Very much agree.
Just because it was just so zany. But anyways, so like saying these niceties, these enhancements that they've thrown in there. So do you remember that in the game you can actually take your infantry units, which a lot of times they were just cannon fodder pretty much. Yeah. You could actually have them go in and
they could occupy those structures.
Occupy structures, and they could actually last for quite a long time then.
Exactly. Like pillboxes were a big part of the Allied, especially their early game defense.
Exactly. And so you could literally throw guys in there that, say you could have a mix-up where you could have infantry guys in there and then bazookas or grenadiers or whatever it was. Exactly. And they would still do that kind of damage. So you could take out tanks, infantry, whatever you wanted, or even if you wanted the anti-air guys. I think they started putting
you could put those in there too.
I think they could put them in there. So they would actually start having those guys in there. So you could have a full service battalion inside of a structure that could take a decent amount of damage. The structure would take the damage, and then they would exit, and they can actually take damage.
And they can still fight.
And so you'd basically throw in an extra health bar on them, which was great.
Yeah, and I think the Allied troops could even set up their own little sandbags, couldn't they?
Yeah. They could do set, which is that's another thing that they kind of started putting in there, started giving them little extra abilities and things like that.
Exactly.
But they really went heavy in that in the third one, which we'll get into that. So another really interesting thing they added into that, which I think they kind of pulled this from Command & Conquer, they started putting oil derricks in there.
Yes.
So it was a lot of times in the old games, or the older one, the last game, Red Alert 1, you would have a finite amount of resources, like on every map, even in like Warcraft or Starcraft. You would have to build, you have to build more pylons or whatever
Yeah,
it was.
there's only so much ore to mine or cherries or whatever your resources for that game.
Yeah, but with this one at least, it was a limited amount of money. So you basically send an engineer in, you would occupy the building, take control of the building, but you would have a steady income at that point. But it would be small, like a trickle, kind of like you get maybe like $100 every few seconds or so, which is like nothing in that game. But at least it was a steady income as opposed to sending your guys out or your ore miners out and getting attacked, losing your ore miner, or maybe if you were ever so lucky or unlucky enough to have it drag on so long that the battle go on so long that you ran out of ore, and then you're just sitting there patiently waiting for, watching your money, counter tick up as your oil derrick is kicking out more and more, oil for you. So that was one of the nice things right there and there. Basically, it's kind of like a lifeline to say, hey, if you do this, you don't have to sell all your buildings. Like, remember in the Moron, because that's
we did that in Red Alert 1 where you'd run out of ore. They're like, okay, time to sell all my buildings and try and buy more tanks.
Or tanks or
infantry
or whatever it is.
Hope you can finish it.
just hope to God. You're like, I'm going to push as hard as I can because I know if I'm out of money, they're out of money too. So I'm just going to go with it. So, but that was just the last ditch effort kind of thing.
But you mentioned the engineers though, and those were cool. I still remember doing the engineer rushes. Did you ever do that?
No, I don't remember.
You could load a bunch of engineers up into a troop transport, drive it right into the middle of your opponent's base, and engineers could claim buildings at that point.
Oh, that's right. And they could take over.
You could start taking over structures, and if you took over the opposing faction's structure, you could build their units.
Oh, I forgot about that completely.
And it was really, really cool. And that's something we always, just when we were playing for fun, would do is
just like
try and take over the advanced structures for the other side. And so you could build all their super units.
And then pretty much they're like, so I guess I'm dead at this point. Just like, or I'm just gonna like half my base now belong to you.
Yeah, just flex on the game a little bit.
Just flex on it. Yeah, there we go. Wow, we are totally we're such boomers at this point. So kind of going off of the gameplay stuff a little bit, the enhancements they kind of threw in there were really interesting. So the Soviet units actually, obviously, like I said earlier, tended to be more durable and heavier with firepower compared to their Allied counterparts. However, like I said, they're a lot more expensive and they move a lot slower. But the thing is, you could, if you were able to hit the Allied units, it's pretty much like 2 hits and they die.
Yeah, and I think this is the game where the Soviets got a tank big enough that it could drive over and smash other tanks.
And so that is the one, exactly. So that was what was called. It was I was saying it earlier in last episode. The Mammoth tank.
Yes.
Was my favorite unit in all of them in Red Alert 2 because I was just like, just roll over the tanks. If they were small, because you had light tanks and you had heavy tanks for the Allies, and even the heavy tank was not nearly as strong as the Mammoth tank.
Yeah,
and you could run over the light tanks. It was amazing, and I'm like, this shouldn't be possible, but you can. But unlike the other Soviet units, the Allied vehicles, like I said, could outmaneuver a lot of your Soviet units. So I don't know if you've ever done this when you ever played the Allied faction. I would literally get like 1 or 2 of the tanks, and I would just do circles around one unit if you got them off. Like
you could do that because the tanks, the big tanks especially, fired slow enough.
It was like boom, 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 and then with like the other ones, you would like just do circles like.
And the tanks had a little bit of ballistics going on. At least the bigger ones did, where you could watch the shells fly and you could sometimes dodge them.
You really could, and like I said, if you get like a recon unit coming out trying to find your base, you could just kill it really quickly. So So like I said, and the same thing kind of went with the Soviet infantry, as opposed to. So I apologize. Now I'm going to backtrack that a little bit. The Soviet infantry, on the other hand, were inferior to the Allied. So, like I said, they kind of offset that a little bit, but they were also cheaper and faster to train. So it was kind of like they took that old USSR kind of motto. We're just gonna keep throwing people at it until we fix the problem.
right.
Because, like, I don't know if you knew that, like,
Welcome to Human Resources.
pretty much. So, like, if you guys don't know this, but like during World War II, the USSR actually lost, I think, more people.
Way in excess. I
Yeah,
believe.
like population wise compared to everyone. I think they almost basically. So if you look at all the other countries, their amount of losses, I think they equal the amount of people that the USSR lost.
Yeah.
And so it was ridiculous. So it's on a somber note. It's very applicable to the game. So which kind of shows they were definitely doing some of the research on this. So okay, so continuing, the Soviet faction also had, like I said, is a little bit more superior in the early game in inland wars. Because of their more powerful and advanced tanks, which we talked about earlier, while the Allied faction is better in late game and has more advanced units, such as those used in the naval warfare portion. So, like you said earlier, a lot of them, what they would do is they would just try and build as many. I don't know how many online games you played in the second one as much, but I didn't play 2 nearly as much as I played 1 and 3.
Yeah.
But I remember playing a couple online games, and I remember people just doing. A lot of people would always pick Soviets, and they would just rush you as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But if you could withstand that initial burst, and the best thing to do would just be to build those pillboxes.
That's what we used to always do.
And those bunkers, and just throw as many bazookas or grenadiers or whatever is in there to basically defend off those tanks. And if you could survive that, you had a good chance of winning the rest of the game. You just had to survive, and just like I said, it was
because they would literally sell all their structures and buy tanks and try and end the game really fast.
And it was just it was a good strategy. I mean, but you find ways to get around it. But so going off the, I'm gonna break you of that habit one of these days.
Yep.
So so kind of going off that, continuing the storyline. It kind of, like I said, it continues where in Red Alert that obviously Hitler was removed from history, and with Hitler gone, Soviet Union takes over. And in this one, even though you have the 2 separate storylines, they definitely kind of geared towards saying the Allies won, or they moved towards how the Allies won, which is why they say that, in the bio a little bit, that Joseph Stalin attempted to conquer Europe but was defeated by the Allied nations and their military destroyed. But so it continued with, though, fearing that a regime change would cause mass unrest in the Soviet Union, the victorious Allies installed Alexander Romanov, a distant relative of Tsar Nicholas II, as the puppet Soviet premier. So it kind of diverts from the last story a little bit. Romanov acquiesces to the Allies' demands at first, but he slowly builds up the Soviet military for defensive purposes. So they do a lot of the things North Korea does. They're like, I'm just trying to keep my country safe, and all that, but meanwhile, I'm going to build these nuclear missiles. That's kind of essentially what
it's just history there for you.
that's what it is. So, but that he builds these up for defensive purposes as a cover for the intended invasion of the United States. The storyline starts off in 1972 with the United States Armed Forces caught completely off guard by the sudden massive Soviet invasion of the United States, with Soviet aircraft, naval vessels, amphibious forces, and paratroopers come in on both the East Coast and the West Coast, with the majority of the Soviet forces coming in through Mexico, starting World War III. So the U.S. attempts to retaliate with the use of nuclear missiles, but Yuri, leader of the Soviet Psy Corps, which is
Exactly.
which he and Premier Romanov's top advisor, uses his mind control to manipulate the personnel charged with launching the warheads, and leaves them to explode in their silos within hours. The U.S. is overrun with Soviet army troops. The player either takes on the role of the American commander tasked by General Ben Carville with defending the United States, or the Soviet commander leading the invasion for Premier Romanov. So that's kind of the gist of that, and like I was saying earlier, they're kind of dipping their toes into that kind of weirdness a little bit again.
Yeah.
But as opposed to dipping the toe, they're kind of like, we're gonna stick a leg in this time.
Exactly. It really starts to come out in the second game.
Which I love that. The fact that they're gonna have some random dude. I'm gonna control them from miles away with my mind to not fire these missiles, which would cause a nuclear holocaust, which is just kind of bizarre, but.
Because this is when they had like the mind control units and all sorts of things start to take off in the series.
Well, so that was the cool thing we'll get into that in the expansion. They really make those playable units as part of Yuri's faction in Yuri's Revenge, and not so much. They kind of use them as one-offs in the missions,
the campaign,
the mission campaign, campaign missions. Wow, let's talk about that. But if you played just the base game, they weren't available for you as far as I can remember. So, but like in the original game, they had two diverging storylines depending on which campaign you pick. During the Allied campaign, the Allied commander is sent to New York City with a special forces team led by Special Agent Tanya Adams, which you actually deal with her quite a bit in the cutscenes, and they use that stereotypical hot chick wearing like camo pants and like a shirt, and I'm like, you guys are really leaning into this kind of thing. They're like, we know that sex sells, so we're gonna try and use it a little bit.
It's your G.I. Jane stereotype.
Absolutely, and I was just like, don't play a game like that. But the teenage boy, I was like, ooh, this is gonna be great.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, that was just kind of funny. But like I said, before they used people from the actual Westwood Studios in Red Alert 1. This one, they actually had legit actors coming out and playing. And I don't know if any of these actors actually went out on to do anything, but it was really interesting to watch that they actually, like I said, they increased their budget for these cutscenes, and you actually see these legit actors with like better sets and things like that. Still not movie grade quality, but still they were a lot more
better than
fun.
your PC could play at that point.
I mean, absolutely. And I was just amazed. I was like, you were looking at these things like, wow, how did they ever do these?
Oh, exactly.
And now you're like, you could be some schmuck in a basement recording an audio. Oh, wait, sorry.
Wow, mentioning a schmuck in a basement.
Yeah, it's a schmuck in a basement, yeah. So you could just have a blue screen that you can, or a green screen cloth, and do your own thing at home if you really wanted to.
Yeah,
it's just amazing how far something like that has come in 20 years. So
it really has. I mean, the nuts and bolts of this type of production are much, much more accessible.
And I mean, you can still buy the most expensive products and get a better quality thing, but if you want to make something homemade, it's really cool and interesting to just kind of looking back a little bit. But anyways.
But I think one thing was interesting earlier too, because that's where they first started having those unique units as well as part of the story.
Yeah, so we'll get into that a little bit more, where they kind of like diverge a little bit. So kind of with the storyline. So after you've talked to Agent Tanya Adams, she goes in to help you repel a Soviet invasion there at New York City, and then to Colorado Springs to liberate the Air Force Academy and then the air base there. As they return victorious, they discover that a Soviet mind-controlling device known as the Psychic Beacon has been deployed in Washington, D.C., forcing the president and General Carville to surrender. The commander frees them from mind control, and the government goes into exile in Canada. God forbid.
Forgot to wear his tinfoil hat.
And you gotta always wear your tinfoil hat, bro. I'm like, you gotta have that, and make sure you have the what is it, the tinfoil on the windows.
Yeah, definitely. You gotta reflect those psychic beams.
Dude, now all I'm thinking of is Weird Al.
The aluminum foil song.
My aluminum foil. That is great. If you guys have never seen that, go out and check it out. The man is a genius.
Yeah, the Mandatory Fun CD was really good.
So after we've been exiled into Canada, the Soviets put another psychic device in Chicago, the Psychic Amplifier, which could control the whole country. The Allies freed the city from the Canadian base by destroying the amplifier. The Soviet Chief Commander General Vladimir retaliates by detonating a nuclear missile in the city. Alarmed, the leaders of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom agree to finally help the U.S. if they disarm the Soviet nuclear missile silos threatening them in Poland, which the commander and Tanya handle on the behest of the president. Now bolstered by the additional men and equipment, the U.S. is able to launch an amphibious assault on Soviet-occupied Washington, D.C. and recapture the city. I remember on that one specifically, you can actually occupy the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
Do you remember?
I
And
do
do you
remember
remember
that.
how they put barbed wire around like the top portion of where her crown is?
Yes.
And like you have little sandbags around the base.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing that. And I was just like I don't know if we're allowed to do that.
Well, that was one of the best maps too. I mean,
That really was because you
I
come in
enjoyed
on
that.
like this pier.
exactly. There's like this big bridge you have to push across to get to the other side,
See, that's
and
the
there's
kind of-
water that goes under it, and that was just I love that map. That was
See,
good.
that was one of those iconic levels that you just like, you don't see that a lot in some of the earlier games, and you can really tell that they're really just stretching their legs with the map design and things like
Well,
that.
yeah, a lot of the maps had unique structures, and a lot of them were historical too, and so it was cool to play these maps with these recognizable landmarks, and then you could occupy them and blow them up, which was even better.
So speaking of that, actually, so after you take back Washington D.C., you go to Pearl Harbor, you defend Pearl Harbor from Soviet assault, and the Allied forces liberate St. Louis and all the Mississippi River south of the city from psychic control and thwart Soviets' attempts to replicate the Allied PRISM technology that creates massive energy beams to destroy units. So, like you were talking about unique units, this is where you get into those crazy units. Like they use the PRISM units, but it's literally just like a tank that shoots a beam out of it.
Yeah, but the more of them that you have nearby, the beam will like reflect from tank to tank, and it gets stronger. And so the Allies have this thing where at the beginning of their assault, when they have all of these units together, they're unstoppable. And as you pick them off, they get weaker and weaker.
Yep. And so it's the same concept. Talking about different, we'll get into it a little bit more, but they throw the same kind of technology up, and now you have PRISM turrets, is what they call them, or PRISM
Yes.
towers, or whatever they're
I
called.
love the Prism Towers. They were so cool just to watch.
It didn't matter what unit you were being attacked by, it would literally just go.
If you lived long
One.
enough to drop like 10 or 20 of those down, you could vaporize anything.
Yeah, well, you could literally build a daisy chain to their base
Exactly.
sometimes, and you could just like take them out that way.
I never did that one. That would be fun.
I did it a couple times, and it was choice to say the least. So after you thwart the Soviets' attempts to get the Allied PRISM technology, General Carver tasks the commander to defend Albert Einstein's laboratory, which holds a prototype chronosphere which can teleport troops anywhere in the world. He is killed by a Soviet suicide bomber. Did I read that right? Yeah. He is killed by a Soviet suicide bomber. Einstein determines the best place to build the chronosphere is on a tiny island in the Florida Keys, not far from Soviet Cuba. The Allies use the chronosphere technology. The Allies use the chronosphere's teleportation capabilities to make a Allied strike team to Moscow. Take a Allied strike team to Moscow, where they successfully destroy the defenses around the Kremlin and teleport a strike team led by Tanya that captures Premier Romanov, leading to the Soviet surrender. So it's basically like a giant coup d'etat at the very end. They're like, when we're never going to be able to like push you guys back, we're just going to have to like push our way in, like one little tiny strike force. So,
Which was a cool mission. I mean,
well, I remember looking at it, and you have it set up because they teleport you in, and you have to actually wait and kind of like try to survive a little bit, and you have to teleport slower and slower and more into the further and further into the base until you get to the actual like Premier, which I believe he is in it's like the center of the base, but I just remember it just being impossible to go in by yourself. You have to like teleport yourself in. So it's kind of an interesting thing though. So anyways, so going on to the Soviet campaign. So like I said, after the Soviets invade the United States, they go in through Washington D.C. and then they destroy the Pentagon, which are obviously the two big icons of our country, which can be argued as some of the big icons of our country. The Soviets launch another invasion into Florida that destroys the U.S. fleet, which was threatening the Soviet invasion of the East Coast. Despite this, the Soviet Chief Commander Vladimir is credited with the success of those campaigns. While Vladimir is back in Moscow, Romanov's top advisor, Yuri, recommends the commander could prove his worth by taking control of New York City using a psychic beam, which they kind of go over that a little bit. And Yuri recommends, obviously, take over New York, whenever Allied forces from South Korea launch an amphibious attack on Vladivostok, the commander successfully repels the Allies, leading Germany and France to send troops to the German-Polish border to defend from the Soviet aggression. The commander takes advantage of this by conquering Paris using the Eiffel Tower, which is another, like you said, they were just all about putting in these iconic landmarks and saying, here, have fun with it, go ahead and take over. So I'm trying to think of anything else they had in there. Did they have one with Buckingham or a Big Ben in there at all?
I can't remember if they had Big Ben. I know there was a couple palaces. I remember the Eiffel Tower. I remember the Statue of Liberty for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember anything else. And you can actually, I know
there was
arch,
a lot of occupiable buildings.
They had
that was a big thing. Yeah, they had an arch. Yeah,
the arch from the Midwest there, which, hey-oh, if you're from St. Louis, you know, got to do the Midwest a little bit. Gateway to the Midwest. Gateway to the West, correct?
Gateway to the West. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
People would stop and supply in St. Louis on the Oregon
That's
Trail.
right. Thank you, Lewis and Clark. Anyway, so after the commander takes advantage of this by conquering Paris using the Eiffel Tower as a massive Tesla coil to destroy the city.
Which was great.
So, like we were saying earlier, they take these random, like, weird things, and they're just like, we're gonna, like, just ratchet it up to 11, like I keep saying. And they use these things like the Tesla technology, and I believe they actually have Tesla tanks.
There was a Tesla tank, and they were absolute murder on infantry.
I remember, just like, so if you could imagine, like, if you guys had ever played the first one, the Tesla tower was just, like you said, it would just decimate troops, but it was not mobile.
It was not.
But the fact that they made it mobile, and it probably didn't have as much armor, but it could still just decimate infantry troops like nobody's business. It was just insane to watch. So, but anyways, with this, the European allies were forced to withdraw their support for the United States. But in the meantime, Yuri, using his psychic abilities to control Romanov, bum bum bum, big surprise there.
Yep.
To control Romanov, has Romanov give him control of the military, much to the disgust of General Vladimir. So you kind of have the whole background there. You kind of have this, like I said, like they had in the first one. It's still kind of that subterfuge, kind of like they had Kane in the first one.
Yeah.
He's the mastermind behind this. Yuri's. They're kind of replaying the scenario again a little bit, but it's still more of a psychic one. So let's see. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna kind of jump down this a little bit. So. Control Romanov. Yuri dismisses Vladimir, basically getting rid of him, and tasks the commander with establishing a base on the Hawaiian Islands. When the Allies tried to use their chronosphere to attack a Soviet research center in the Ural Mountains, the commander successfully defends the facility. Shortly afterwards, Yuri tells the commander that Vladimir killed Romanov, declaring Vladimir a traitor and a non-person. Yuri orders the commander to capture Vladimir in the White House. After Vladimir's capture and execution, the commander successfully captures the U.S. president and destroys the Allied superweapon, the weather control machine capable of creating powerful thunderstorms. So that was like an endgame thing that you got.
Well, you mentioned the super weapons on the last episode. Yep. They added a lot more of them in this one.
And that's why I was like, so you basically get two
per faction.
Two per faction. So you get the chronosphere and the weather machine for the Allies. It was the Iron Curtain and what else was it?
The Iron Curtain, and was it like a missile or something?
I think you get missiles for both, or was it?
Both got missiles.
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Because I know there was a mind control thing, but I thought that was Yuri's faction in this.
Oh, maybe it was. Maybe you do get both.
Because there was a power that could control an AOE mind control, like you'd pick a spot and control all
that was troops. Definitely your. No,
I think that was Yuri's faction.
That was Yuri's faction.
Yeah.
So.
I can't remember what the other Soviet one was.
So we're gonna finish up this little bit backstory, and like I said, we'll go into the units a little bit more. So impressed by the commander's victories, Yuri invites them back to Moscow to thank them for their aid. Yuri invites them back to Moscow to thank them, but their aide, Lieutenant Zofia, I'm going to try to say that correctly, I'm butchering all these names, reveals that Romanov recorded a message before his death in which he reveals that Yuri was mind controlling him and orders them to bring Yuri to justice. The commander attacks Moscow with the bulk of the Soviet army and destroys the Kremlin, seemingly killing Yuri. Not so much, which is why they have the expansion. They then use information from Yuri's files to destroy the Allies' last-ditch effort to assault the Soviet Union using another chronosphere, effectively becoming ruler of the world. In the final cutscene, it is revealed that Yuri has survived, his brain floating in a glass jar filled with water, and telepathically communicating to the commander, saying it would have been good to see you inside. Would have been good to see inside your mind, General. I still may get the chance. Bum bum bum.
Bum, bum, bum.
And I mean, they went full tilt on it. Like, what?
And this is where things got really strange, really fast.
Absolutely. And so that was really cool. So I remember reading a little bit. So, do you remember where they put Yuri at? Like where he's from originally?
I don't remember where they put
Transylvania.
Oh gosh.
So they're like, we're gonna pick the most
because that's the logical place for a psychic to come from.
Yeah, dark, depressing place ever. That I'm like, so it's like a step away from saying he's Dracula essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
So I was just like, this is insane. So, but so in Yuri's Revenge was like I said, which is the expansion they had there. You have 2 new campaign arcs, the Allied and the Soviets. But when you get the campaign, when you buy it, you get the additional faction Yuri,
yes,
which was really cool. Which they really, like I said, heavily puts down more of the psychic control. They have cloning vats, things like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like really kind of interested. I think I played that faction more than any of the other ones whenever I bought that. I remember.
Yeah, for Yuri's Revenge, I was more into the Allied because I really liked the prism tanks and the prism towers.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember them having cloning vats. I still remember them having like mind control tanks, I think.
Yeah, so the whole strategy behind the Yuri faction was basically your guys were slightly weaker than everybody else's.
Yeah.
They were slightly more expensive than everybody else's.
Yes.
So you had the worst of both worlds, but you could take control of any unit.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you had a mind control unit, you could take over the prism tanks and basically send their own units back at them, which was great.
It was.
And so that was the whole strategy behind that, which was not a great strategy overall, but I mean, it was something to work with.
It was a lot of fun.
It was fun, but I think it had some stuff that was lacking a little bit. But so this is where you were talking about earlier with the newer units. They actually threw a few more extra units in with the Allies. So they had the anti-infantry tank, or anti-tank infantry, which they had that GI in there. Robot tanks, I don't know if you remember those or not.
Yeah,
They were basically the only reason they had those in there was because they were immune to mind control to basically combat them.
But you had to have like a robot controller nearby. I think.
Yeah, I think it's what it was.
Destroyed that, they stopped working.
Or they had another one which is basically called the Battle Fortress, which it's like a mobile bunker for the infantry units.
I did love the Battle Fortress.
So a lot of times what I would do, I don't know how you did it, but I would literally have like 6 or 7 guys in the Battle Fortress, let them get near the Yuri guy, and then deploy them all, and then he'd only take over one. Yeah. And so they would just kill him, and then I'd get back into it. So
exactly,
there are ways to get around it.
The Battle Fortress is great because when you loaded them up with a ton of units, they could really tear through things.
Well, they can move a lot faster too than just the basic units.
And when they died, you still had all the units, which remember the Allied units could dig in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what they did.
The Soviets didn't really do.
I can't remember if that was that one where they could set up, they can deploy defensive. It was a defensive mode.
Yeah, like you deploy defense mode, and they like put down some sandbags, and they take out a machine gun.
Yeah, I think their armor went up a little bit, but they prevented them from moving around at all, and you had to and it took a few seconds for them to move in and out of that phase, which they really move into that a little bit in Red Alert 3, which we'll get into that a little bit. But the Soviets, going off the extra units they had the battle bunker, which was basically they could build their own bunkers or own structures to put units in, and the helicopter gunship, which is the same thing. It's basically like a mobile flying bunker.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they did there, and it was some niceties. But like I was saying, in Red Alert 3, they really upped it a little bit. They took
it to a zany place in Red Alert 3.
Which was great. So. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to get into Red Alert 3 now, guys. This was the final, as far as I can tell, I don't know if they have any plans to make another one, but this was their final...
It's the final installment.
The
Command & Conquer series drug on for a lot longer.
They did.
They even had like some first person stuff, and it was not good.
I'm not going to go any. I'm not going to get into the last Command and Conquer game that came out. It was disappointing to say the least. So hopefully they're going to get back to their roots a little bit, but we'll see. I really hope they do maybe do a remaster of all of Red Alert 2 and 3. I don't know if it's been long enough for it, but yet because actually Red Alert 3 only came out in 2008, which it's only been 12 years, which is
gosh, it seems so much longer.
I know, right? But it's barely been out over a little over a decade. So it was really originally released for PC in 2008, but obviously, like I said, this was one of the first ones that I've noticed that it was released for all systems except for like Nintendo. So it was a release for the 360, Xbox 360, PS3, and OS, which I'm assuming OS X, which I believe this is that's Mac, I believe.
Yeah,
I believe so. I'm not a Mac user if you guys haven't figured that out, so I apologize to any Android or any Apple users out there. It's not my cup of tea, but it is what it is. Probably should learn. They actually had an additional expansion called Uprising in 2009. Which was really cool, which we're going to get into a little bit more, and adds a lot more interesting units and kind of goes into that psychic realm a little bit again too. So going off of staying true to nature, they had those live action scenes again.
Yeah.
So like you said, do you remember any of the major characters or any of the actors?
I don't remember that one, no.
Do you not remember none of the actors?
I don't remember the actors.
So the one that stood out to me before anyone else, before I even looked these up, I remember was Tim Curry's in it.
Really? I had forgotten that.
He plays the Russian premier, and he does this amazingly, like, campy Russian accent. It's phenomenal. Perfect. And so you can tell, like, this is like Tim Curry after he's put on a few pounds. He's not Rocky Horror fit anymore.
Yeah.
He's definitely got into that. I was the evil cardinal in Three Musketeers. I've got a little weight now on me. But this is also like before he got a lot of throat cancer and he doesn't do any work anymore, which that makes me so sad because he has one of the most amazing voices.
Oh, Tim Curry was great.
He's such a great villain. He really is.
He really is.
He can play anything. But I think hit between this and the other role that I love him the most in, he plays the butler in Clue.
Oh yes.
And he is such a jerk, and that is so great. So those are like my two favorite roles ever for him. But anyways, so they have him as Russian premier. Jonathan Pryce, which is he plays the Allied Field Marshal. I don't know if you have or not. Have you ever seen Brazil? So it's a weird like sci-fi movie. He's a British actor. Okay. He also if you saw his face, you know him. I'm trying to think what else he's in. He recently played, I believe he played Pope Benedict in The Two Popes.
Okay.
So he's got that. So I can't, because Anthony Hopkins played the one the Pope before him. Wow, I'm having a massive brain fart.
John Paul II.
No, not John Paul, not Benedict. No, he was Benedict then.
Okay.
Because he plays Francis. Sorry, wow.
Plays Francis. Okay.
I apologize. That was a missed up on my part. I said the last time. I had the name and I didn't even think about it.
I would say they can't have Anthony Hopkins play one of the German popes. So.
No. He played. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins actually played the German pope. He actually plays Benedict. Actually, so and it's the other way around. So and Price actually plays Pope Francis, which he actually does a really good Spanish accent. So, anyways, but then they also have J.K. Simmons plays the U.S. president. You know who J.K. Simmons is? His big role.
No.
Have you ever seen any of these Spider-Man films?
Yes.
So J. Jonah Jameson?
Yes.
That guy that plays J. Jonah Jameson, that's J.K. Simmons.
Okay.
And so all the other, he does a lot of, their insurance commercials. I'm trying to remember it's not Allstate, that's the black guy. He does those. And I'm trying to remember whatever, God, I can't remember, but he always plays those car insurance commercials, but that's him too. That's J.K. Simmons.
Okay.
And he's got that kind of that deep kind of like voice, and he's always kind of a gruff, kind of funny guy. He's always really kind of sarcastic guy, but
But they got some big names for this.
Absolutely. And the last one they did, which kind of spoiler a little bit, they add that third faction. George Takei is actually the Empire. He's the emperor of the Rising Sun. He's in charge of that empire. So that's like kind of the Japanese / Asian faction. a little bit. So, which I totally forgot that George Takei was in this.
Yeah,
And he's,
I had forgotten that as well.
but they all have. But you notice, like every single one of like the guys that are in charge all have like these deep voices, and they're always like these iconic, kind of a little bit. I guess a little bit masculine figures. I guess a little bit, but it's just kind of really interesting to kind of see all those guys in there. But anyways. So you can tell if you've watched any of the cutscenes, they go all out in this one. This is like out of all three of them, this is my favorite. I don't know how you feel about it.
It's very good.
It's definitely my favorite out of all three of them. But the gameplay, the things that they've added to this game, they add so much more to this game. Like I said, they add an entirely new faction. I guess they see the love that they got from whenever they added the Yuri faction a little bit.
Yeah.
They add like I said, they add the Empire of the Rising Sun, which is really a very much. It's kind of like, what would you call it? A technocratic society, but it's got some sort of. It's not Hindu. It's not Buddhist. It's I guess Shinto a little bit. Probably more of a Shinto technocratic kind of thing. Because he definitely talks about like family and honor and spirits a little bit. A tiny bit.
Confucian maybe then if it's more family.
Maybe it's more Confucius a little bit, so that's the word I'm looking for. But like I said, their units focus a lot more with the psionic and the psychic things, and they really see that in the expansion with Uprising, which is, if you've ever seen the cover art, it's literally a Japanese schoolgirl in uniform, but she's got like psychic rays and her hands outstretched, and you're just like, okay, so this is like on the nose. I get it. We're gonna go for this all the way. So,
it's like full on kung fu hustle type stuff.
A little bit, yeah, definitely. Not the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon route. It's definitely that kung fu hustle kind of thing. So it's great. What's the one where? Yeah, it is Kung Fu Hustle. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, but when they do all the animal styles and the guy's like a giant frog or the different.
Exactly. Maybe you're thinking of Kung Pao Enter the Fist as well.
That's what I was thinking too. I like my face, your fist style.
We taught him wrong on purpose as a joke.
It's like, oh my god, I love how they just off-centered the voices on that a little bit. This is the audio track. That's all it is.
Just to make it intentionally terrible. It was great.
I love it. So, like I was telling you with the second one, where they kind of put in that mechanic you were saying, where the infantry units can deploy and sit for a little bit. They add a secondary unit to each unit, so every single unit has an additional ability.
Yes.
And I don't remember if you do remember any of them, because
I'm trying to remember some of them. I remember I think they were copying that from StarCraft. Did that first? I think
a little bit. Yeah, they do that.
Right.
So the one I remember, I don't know if you remember this one, is you remember the they call them. I always call them the radiation infantry unit from the Soviets.
Yes, I forgot about them.
So they could literally walk in and they could shoot a little bit, but it was a slow like radiation beam. But if you deployed, it was just like an AOE.
They let out like an AOE radiation.
But it would slowly shrink in a little bit before they reset. So if you were watching it long enough, you could kind of move in slowly, and then kill them.
Yeah.
But it would stay, even after they died, it would stay there for a little bit before it dissipated.
I remember the engineers could repair buildings and take them over at that point. I remember the Allies had a chrono trooper that I think could teleport, and then they could also like phase other troops out of existence.
Yeah, for a brief minute. Those are some endgame infantry units too.
Yeah, they were cool.
So yeah, I totally forgot about those actually. I don't even remember if I have. I'm sure I've got it down here because I think you'd be happy to know I have only 3 more pages of notes to go through, James. You're just like, God, make it stop. Why did he take so many notes? I told you I was way more thorough on this one than anyways. But like I said, going off that, it's okay. I got the cyanide pill just in case you need to take it. You can take that capsule if you need to.
Good old Plan C.
Anyway, so like on top of that, they had I don't know if you remember this. You remember the mechanic? They added this into. You can actually build your bases on the ocean parts.
Yes, I remember that.
So I remember one time I was playing. I don't know if I was playing you or Chris or who I was playing. I was looking for your base and I couldn't find it anywhere. This is like one of the first few times I'd ever played it.
Yeah.
And you had built your entire base except for like 1 or 2 little things on the sea.
Yeah.
I was like, this is horseshit.
This is not cool. My tanks cannot reach you here.
This is not fair. Why should I be made to do this? And like now I have to build naval units. This is dumb. So, but that's the cool thing about this. They kind of balance out a few more things a little bit more. on the factions. So instead of really pushing the Allies as the superior naval force, they kind of even out a little bit and kind of give the Soviets a little bit more of the a little bit more. I guess you would call it
Mobility, maybe?
a little bit more mobility
Yeah.
in the sea and in the air. They had a lot more air units in this one too.
Air units became a thing. I remember the stealth bombers were a big thing
Yeah.
for this
So
one.
do you remember any of the major units that they added in here at all?
Now
No.
You're testing me now.
No,
Not
I'm
as
just
well.
I'm just trying to see
Once
what
you
you
mention
remember.
it, I'll remember them. But
So do you remember in the Soviets? Like I said, they keep those ironclad
Like big war
mechanics
machine
where they
things.
have they're more expensive. A lot of their units are more
Yeah.
expensive, but they still are like hugely more like superior in firepower and like that. So do you remember they have the airships? With
do.
the smiles, with they
I
literally
do remember the airships. Were they like big blimps? I think.
they're big, yeah.
Yeah.
They're air blimps, yeah, and they're bombers, but they're so slow.
I remember the big blimps because you would build like 10 or 20 of them, and they would inch across the map.
Yep. Take like 2 to 3 minutes to get to their
And
base.
if you were the Allied, you were sending out your fighter planes over and over to try and kill these things before they got
as
to your
quickly
base.
as possible, and so maybe
Once
take
they
out,
reached you, you were done.
no, because they were just massive AOE drops and things like that, and you were just like, I'm done with this. So
I forgot about the blimp yard.
I know. And so they would do things. They had that in the second one, but they really upped it in the third one. But they also now have flag troopers, attack dog. Well, that's what the Soviets, but the Allied now strictly have the attack dogs.
Yeah. So the attack dogs were huge for the Allies.
Yeah, but so the thing that the Soviets, and you could tell that they were really playing around with this stuff. Instead of having attack dogs for the Soviets, they have attack bears. They have war bears. I think that's what they call them.
Yeah, I want to say I can't remember if they fulfilled the same type of function though, because I remember the attack dogs. I remember they could pick up invisible units. They were really strong against infantry, and so even into the late game for the Allies, you wanted to scatter your attack dogs everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't remember using the war bears as much for stuff.
No, I don't think they did as much, but they definitely kind of because like with all the other units, they definitely mirrored.
Yeah, they were cool as heck.
Well, they mirrored the factions' kind of ideology and how they played.
Yeah.
So they were slower. They cost a lot more. I don't think they had as many abilities. But if they are attacking, they could just maul through infantry units. So, but other units they had in there, they had really cool and interesting things. They had units like heavy tanks, which were they renamed the mammoth tanks, hammer tanks. They could tear. That could actually tear weapons from enemy units with magnetic beams.
Yes.
So do you remember that? So you
remember
can
the
literally
magnetic
grab other units and just like fling them across the map or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So they would do things like that, and they had light anti-infantry unit walkers called sickles,
Yes.
and so it was basically just like a machine gun. But I don't know if it was a walker or what it was.
They're
But
like little robots, weren't they?
yeah, they could jump. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I forgot about those. Yeah, and so they have those, and then they also have, like I said, with a lot more naval units. They have the Stingrays, which are naval units, but they had Tesla. They had twin-mounted Tesla coils. So do you remember them? It's literally they're out front. Do you remember? Can remember how they look like. They almost look like they're kind of thin at the back, and they kind of like move. They kind of like a pincer, and then in the middle they have two little prongs you can see, and they shoot out from them.
I do remember those.
And so I remember those. And then they also had the Bullfrog, which was an amphibious transport.
I remember using those a lot.
But they also had there was also anti-aircraft though. So that was a good little dual purpose. So like you can kind of tell they were really starting to play with different unit types and really try and diversify and make the differences between the two factions very apparent.
Well, and this is where both factions got so many options that you could really build in different ways. Because I mean, they got some really advanced structures. Like I remember, wasn't there like a spy ops I think for each one where you could train like an invisible like spy type enemy?
I think there was.
Because I want to say the Allied they had like it wasn't the Tanya character from Red Alert 2, but they had a high end spy person who could like paint targets and call down airstrikes and What did the Soviets have? They had like an espionage unit. I think they could steal technologies, if I remember.
I think they did. I don't. I have to look into it a little bit more, but I know. I think.
Because I think if they could sneak into the opposing factions' buildings, they could steal some of their technology, and you gain some of their abilities.
I think they could steal. Then they stole money. That's what.
That's what it was. Money. Yeah.
They could steal the money.
I remember it being very important to not let them do that. But
Yeah,
I can't remember what they did.
That's what I remember, because the Allies were, like you were saying, they had more of the steel, the intellectual stuff, like the technology,
That's what it was saying, yeah.
and they would be able to find, say, they could steal different types of units from them with special technology. Because I remember if you stole their technology, you could actually build.
You could build their super weapon.
You could build their super weapon, or you can build like weird mix matched
Mismatched units, yeah.
units that were like part Soviet, part Allied, which was kind of a cool concept.
It was cool, and at this point, I remember like you had so much you could do. There was naval forces, air forces. You had infantry. You had tanks.
Yeah.
You had your super weapon stuff, and then you had your base defense type stuff, and you had this espionage type stuff. Like there was just so much going on.
So, kind of building on that a little bit, do you remember any of the unique structures that they throw in there, other than, like you said, and you said the espionage building and things like that. Those were what's one of them. Do you remember any of the ones from like the Soviets or the?
I know the Iron Curtain was still a thing.
Yeah.
I know the Tesla coil defenses were still a thing.
So, do you remember the
what else
the super reactor?
The super reactor.
It was,
yeah,
it was literally a nuclear.
It was a nuclear power plant.
Yeah,
and I remember because they were great because they made so much power.
But do you remember when if they were blown up, they would actually cause
they caused
AOE
like a
damage.
big like atomic explosion, and they laid down like a radiation zone.
Yeah, and it would lasted for like 10 to 15 minutes or something
Pretty
like
much
that.
the rest of the game.
It was stupid. I totally forgot about that when I was reading that. I was just like, this is bizarre.
Well, because in previous games you would just build an endless number of these little electric power plants to power up all your stuff.
I know. So yeah, that was kind of just really interesting to look at that. But like you said, obviously they still had the infamous Iron Curtain. So I think in this one they kind of dialed back a little bit on the super weapons, and I think they only did one per, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look into it again.
Because I think both sides could build the missile silos to launch.
Yeah, I think all three factions could do that. So, like you said, they kind of in addition to like adding new units and things like that, they really kind of like doubled down on this Air Force thing or the Fire Forces, things like that. So they do like Kievs, like I was telling you, the MiGs and the helicopters, which you would eventually end up getting. The different types of warheads from the Soviets. So that's, from what I could tell, I'm reading, the Soviets were actually only ones to actually get different types of nuclear missiles. It says in here, so apparently not nuclear missiles. So this, I did read that wrong actually. So they actually got the thing what's called the vacuum imploder. Do you remember this? I was trying to find it.
Tell me what it did now. I remember.
This is it's a warhead that sucks humans. That's humans' vehicles and damages buildings into a dense hole before exploding.
Okay, I might vaguely recall that.
See, I couldn't remember it at all because I haven't played it so long.
At least, yeah.
It was just bizarre to try to. I'm just trying to look. I haven't had time to look up a video, but I was looking at it. And I'm like, that's just not making any sense at all at this time. But anyway, so as contrast to that, the Allies kind of kept a lot of different things. They had a wider of a range of technology, it seemed like, but they did things like weapon scrambling rays, the freeze and shrink rays. I don't remember any of that. The amphibious destroyers, magnetic armor, things like that. But they seem to have more of, like you said, the espionage kind of like tilt to it. So they had like the Mirage tanks and things like that.
They had the Mirage tanks that could turn invisible.
Yeah, and they had, I believe they're the only faction that had the spy.
They had a spy unit.
They called her Tanya.
Yeah, because I think she could call an airstrike. She could steal intelligence or something. And she could like plant a C4.
Yeah, like you said, they blow up the building, which they kind of had. They had that in one a little bit, but she was only available for like missions.
It was a mission-centered thing.
Yeah, so that's when they go off of. But the thing that the Allies kind of, like I was saying earlier, they really push more of that future tech.
Yes.
They still had the I believe it was. They still have the Chronosphere.
Did they keep the robotic tanks?
I don't remember. I'd have to look into that a little more. Like I said, I didn't. It was more of, I don't think they had the patient the robot tanks, if I remember correctly, because I think they were dealing with more of like, just like some of the other ones, especially in the first one. The Allies have they have that long game strategy. Like if you can make it to where you get your super weapons, you're definitely gonna win.
Yeah.
And that seemed more kind of like what they had here. And they had things. So if you noticed, do you remember, like I was saying, in the first game, you had in Red Alert 1, if you picked whichever country you picked within the faction, they would give you specific super weapons.
Yeah.
Or not specific super weapons.
A little bonus, yeah.
Little bonuses. So remember in Red Alert 3, whichever country you picked, you would get a specific type of super weapon.
Yes.
So like if you picked France, you would get the proton gun or the or you'd get like a bigger, like a special kind of unit or whatever it is. So like if you did France, you would get like, I think I can't remember what they called like the Big Bertha or something like that. And it was a different defense. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember that or not, but
Big Bertha was just a big bomb, I think, wasn't it?
No, it was. There was like a big cannon. I remember.
That's what it was. It was yeah, I remember that because you could shoot halfway across the map with that thing.
Yeah, and so but you can only build like one of them at a time.
Yeah, you can only build one of your super weapon.
Yeah, I remember that. That was kind of one of those random little things they kind of, and that's one of the things I kind of had a gripe with, that you had to pick a specific country to have a specific weapon, and it kind of like gave you good things or bad things. So, but I mean, they were trying different things, obviously.
Yeah.
So getting on to the final faction with different units, like a brand new set of things with the Empire of the Rising Sun. So just take a gander. What do you think? What trope did they go with on this?
Oh, Kung Fu.
Now they did samurai.
Samurai.
Like you said, it was kind of got that Asian or very Japanese centric kind of style. Obviously coming from like a Japanese empire kind of thing, but they use a lot of energy style weapons, mechs. And I gotta tell you that the psychic schoolgirls, but they do a lot of transformer things. So do you remember that they some of their ships can actually transform into aircraft and vice versa?
Yes, I do remember that, and they were pretty dang cool that way.
Well, it was one of the first units where you think about it's like it's the same kind of strategy with our concept with like the Bullfrog from the Russian side, that it's an amphibious unit, but as opposed to being it was just water or air, which as far as I could tell, I hadn't seen something like that in a game yet, which is kind of a cool concept.
No, that's a pretty unique concept.
Which you do see that a little bit more nowadays if you play any RTSs. They do put a lot more things like that, like with StarCraft 2. I was trying to remember if there's 3 yet. I'm like, man, it's been so long since I've done that. But their big thing was like greater versatility and being able to get in there and try and basically outwit or outmaneuver either group. So they could, and then they could fight whatever you threw at them, essentially. So like if you're the Soviets, you threw tanks at them, you switch to being air units, or mostly air units, and you can fight them off, or vice versa, land units, or whatever it was. So, but anyways, so the basic storyline for this is kind of short and sweet. So as the Soviet Union faces defeat at the hands of the Allied Nations, Soviet General Nikolai Krokov and Colonel Cheredenko used a time machine beneath the Kremlin to travel back to Brussels in the year of 1927 at the Solovey International Physics Conference and eliminated Albert Einstein. So they're pulling like what you did in the first one, where you go back and take out Hitler.
They're just redoing the whole thing.
And I was just like,
which might be why this series never got another continuation, because that's kind of the logical conclusion to the whole thing. Is we're going to go back and undo this entire timeline. Which
kind of makes me sad a little bit, because essentially you could just literally do it over and over and over again. But I mean, maybe that is why. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, honestly, if they redid...
It's like, we meet again, Mr. Hitler.
Yeah, really. And it's literally like a James Bond kind of like scenario. And it just becomes just goofier than before. But I would love to see him do it again. But
yeah.
So after they do that, they change the future, and returning to the present, they discover that Cheredenko who was the colonel I was talking about earlier, is now the premier of the Soviet Union, and the Soviets are on the brink of conquering Europe. But that is at that point. That's when they diverge from, so like in the first one, that's when they diverge, and the Empire of the Rising Sun moves in, and Japan declares war against the Soviet Union and the Allies, with the desire to for complete world domination. Because
of course,
why not? If you got one person that says I can rule the world, the other person was like, I'm just as good as they are.
There can only be one world ruler.
That's true. Oh my God. There's a I'm trying to remember the game. Yeah, I think it's called World Dictator or something like that. It's like this goofy little sim.
Okay.
And I cannot remember when it came out, but it's essentially World President or something like that.
Okay. I don't think I played that one.
It's really goofy. It's basically you just try to, it's like a political machine. You try to garner your way to get to the top, and it's just goofy and satirical. And I kind of remember.
That sounds fun.
I have to look it up sometime and show it to you. But anyways, so the Japanese declares war on everybody, and basically they say, due to our divine destiny, which is very much like in the Japanese Empire kind of setting, how they felt about things. Well, I mean, a lot of
heaven's mandate.
A lot of monarchies are like that, though.
It's the mandate of heaven.
So that this basically say we are the only ones that can be world rulers, and they, due to the elimination of Einstein, nuclear weapons never get invented in this game. Are never invented in this game. The Soviet Union is unable to stop the invasion, and at that point, the war of three powers of three-world war between the Soviets, Allies, and the Empire kick off. So that's kind of the basic storyline. I don't know if I'm going to get too into the storyline or each campaign again with everybody, because it's a little convoluted, and you guys can watch it, and it's like most of them.
I'm sure it's up on YouTube now.
It's definitely up on YouTube. So, but it definitely kind of like, you can pick one of three lines, and all of them always have that unique ending where their leader wins and they rule the world. It's pretty basic. But there's one thing I want to touch on that I don't know if you remember. I completely forgot about it.
Okay.
So, do you remember the end of the Empire of the Rising Suns thing at all?
I do not.
So it's one of those things that they put in there. So there is an actual mission in there that you take control of a giant mecha samurai.
Oh gosh.
And like I said, and you go in and you just destroy things.
I did not remember that.
And if you get bored and you want to see this, guys. So that's some foreshadowing, because I don't know. Did you see the news story a while back about the giant Mobile Suit Gundam that a Japanese company built? It actually moves.
I saw like a small scale one. Did they make like a full size one?
I don't know if it's full size, but it's humongous.
Wow, no, I did not see that.
I don't know if it's pilotable or it has somebody in it, or if it's like controlled by robotics or not. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, I can't remember, they just debuted. That's something.
Oh wow, that thing's enormous.
You see it? Yeah.
Oh, and that's classic Gundam too.
I know. Not the endless waltz stuff that you guys see with all your fancy mechanics.
No, this isn't even Gundam. Like, this is like the old school Gundam.
I know. I was like,
that's awesome.
That is a super Japanese thing to do. They're like, we're gonna make an iconic anime mecha unit just because, and I'm just like, why not? You guys do your thing. So, anyway, so this game was also well received. It received about around 82% from most critics and things like that. But this was one of those things. This is kind of where EA kind of starts rearing its head a little bit. I don't know if you remember this or not, but they did the Secure-ROM thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a predecessor to the, it's not the DVR, it's, what's it called? Well, basically, you have to have internet connectivity.
It was the digital rights management thing. So this is when you had to have the CD in the disc tray to play, and you had to be online. And
well, also, it was one of those things where
this was in the era of extremely heavy-handed digital rights protection.
And which, I mean, I can understand it a
little
bit.
Where even owning the game legitimately, it was a pain in the butt to make it work.
Exactly. So kind of go into that a little bit. The executive producer, Chris Corey, he actually stated that that whenever this was released, it would come bundled with this Secure-ROM, which the software it prevented you. It only allowed you to activate and install this game 5 times
Oh,
with the
gosh.
serial code.
Wow.
But the very first, like you said, the very first time you activated it, you had to be online to do it.
Yes.
And they still they have that a little bit. I think they deactivated it, the secure ROM, where you have to have it installed. Because I remember I actually bought it on Steam a long time ago, like whatever. Because I was like, I've got it in here somewhere on my stack of games that I have back there. I have Red Alert 3, but I remember trying to put it in and it wouldn't let me install it. So I actually had to go back and buy it off of Steam. I bought it for like $20 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, but I guess they removed the install thing, but you still have to connect to the internet through EA servers,
Yeah.
which was just bizarre.
It was bizarre because I remember Red Alert 2 required you to have the disc in the disc tray.
Yeah.
And unlike previous games that had that security feature, it had to stay in the disc tray while you were playing.
Yep.
So we used to, back when we were young, poor children, we
Yeah.
we had a virtual disk drive we had installed where you
Yeah.
partitioned off a part of your hard drive to function as a disk drive, and you could load a CD.
I
in the
remember
disk
us
drive.
doing that. That is some hacker shit right there for you guys. That's how we did things back
So
in the
you
day.
could have a fake virtual disc.
And
to
you can
stay
actually
in the
still
disk
do that
drive.
a lot. I can't remember what
Because we would buy the game once, and then we'd all try and play at the same time off the one disc that we had.
Yep, I do remember that actually. That was tremendous. Oh my god, I totally forgot. I'm so glad you brought
Yeah,
that back
because
up.
the first game you just had a crack file, but then they got wise to that. And the second game you had to have the disc in. And the third game, that was the answer to that, was that you could only install it 5 times.
Yeah, see there, guys, we're not the angels that you make us out to be. So I don't think you probably ever thought of that of us to begin with, but it is what it is. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that vividly. Yeah, I can remember if you showed me that, and I was just remember you showing me that. And I'm thinking, I'm like, God, I'm so out of my depth here. I was like, I'm at the, without trying to kiss your butt a little bit. I was like, I'm sitting at the feet of a master here, and it's like a student learning something for the first time. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, so you showed me quite a few things back in the day, and I was just like completely oblivious
I was
to.
just copying what my dad showed me.
I know that's the great thing about it is because I didn't know that, and I just assumed.
Well, you couldn't just look it up at that point. You had to know someone who knew.
Yeah.
Unless you were into computers enough to understand the tech forums at the time, which you could find anything on, but.
I know, which
for a kid, that wasn't an approachable way to learn something.
No.
There wasn't like a YouTube tutorial.
No, not at all. So, but yeah, that was one of the only really big things that I found that was like controversial about the game. So I guess to wrap things up, what are your? I know we've been sitting here for probably a good hour, probably if not more, probably talking about these last 2 games.
Yeah.
So, like, what are your overall feelings of the game?
Overall, the whole trilogy was awesome. I mean, like we talked about for many reasons, it was a big landmark in RTSs in general. Having talked through them, I think Red Alert 2 might have been the one I played the most. It's definitely the one I remember most clearly. And that was just a riot.
It's true.
I will say, more than the competitive stuff, I enjoyed just sitting on the map and just building it up.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, overall, they were just really, really great quality games. Like we talked about, the cutscenes definitely set them ahead of their time in terms of story missions. I don't have a lot negative to say about it, really.
I mean, not really. I mean,
certainly the resource management and stuff is kind of simplistic by today's standards, just having the one resource, but...
Well, I mean, with StarCraft, like you said, you've got 3 separate resources that you have to build up on, which I think it's what kind of set it apart a little bit, so...
Yeah, and the idea of like newer games have this idea of a housing or like a troop capacity thing. Yeah. They didn't have that. You could just keep building.
You could just
build as much as you could afford. You could build
enormous armies. I remember that, just massive amounts of armies. But yeah, that was yeah. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I mean, like I said, it definitely hasn't aged well as well as I remember it.
Yeah, I mean, they were really great games. They don't have the timeless competitive quality of StarCraft. I think for a lot of that reasons, they don't have the same level of complexity. They don't have the same level of multiple resource management. But I think that's part of what made it so much fun for so many kids and teens to play is you could just get on there and have a good time.
No, absolutely. I think that's kind of like what you were saying earlier. I think that's kind of why you don't really see Red Alert 4 on the horizon anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, they're gonna just keep doing these remastered to keep the property in their wheelhouse.
Exactly. Keep it from falling out of copyright.
Yeah, following a copyright, and so they can just keep it in case they ever do decide, maybe they want to have a resurgence of Red Alert 4 or Command and Conquer or whatever. It's just like, so they can do that whenever. So like I said, like I said, even though it hasn't really aged as well as it could, I still find a lot of nostalgia in it. And during this time, I don't know like you guys, but nostalgia is exactly what I need. A nice little shot of nostalgia in the butt to keep me going, especially with all the quarantining and all the awful crap that's happening nowadays.
It's the name of the day this summer for me, at least. I mean, it's just...
Well, also, like, it's hitting the fall now, and it's just, like, I like to sit in my basement. I don't have to do as much yard work. Mm-hmm. I can kind of just chill and play a little bit of RTS and just relax a little bit. So and it's kind of one of those games I kind of hope to maybe like let my kid take a look at it when he gets a little bit older. I'm sure Jackie will kill me if I ever let him do that.
Yeah.
But
mentioning nostalgia, the Super Mario 3D All Stars I think is going to be played this week.
Oh my God! So that's another thing. Talking about hints, dude. When I was saying that earlier in last week's episode, man, dude. We've got an episode on the horizon. It's got over Mario 64. If you guys are interested in it, I think James and I might sit down with that one again. But
does Luigi exist?
Oh, dude, there's so many fun things I want to talk about that I found out about it that are just bizarre. The ideas that Nintendo went into, but it's just Nintendo being Nintendo, which is what I love about them.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, if you guys are going to be interested in that. I believe next week's episode might be over something that Jackie and I might be looking into. And the week after that, well, no, take that back. So this is going to be a two-parter, like I said earlier. And this will be for Red Alert 1 will be over the next week's this coming week's episode. And then the week after that, we'll have the second half of Red Alert for Red Alert 2 and 3 that James are going to. And then after that, I believe we're going to be trying to go into either Crash Bandicoot or something similar to the Jackie and I, something nostalgic for her. And then maybe, if our schedules align correctly, James.
I think it will.
I think we're going to try and try and push for Mario 64, especially with the, like you said, Super Mario All-Stars 3D coming out.
It seems like the time to talk about it.
I mean... I definitely have it on my Switch already. So.
I do too.
So I'm definitely going to try and play it a little bit to kind of get into that mode a little bit. So if you guys are, like I said earlier, if you guys are interested in any of the topics we have, like I said, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, or you can follow us over Buzzsprout. I have a lot of links anywhere they're going to be posted if you feel interested in. If you guys have a topic you want us to talk about, please let us know because... we are more than happy to dig into some of these things because right now we're just doing stuff that we enjoy.
Oh, yeah, and let us know what you think of the format and everything else too.
And like I said, and if we're getting too long-winded, if we're getting happy on things, if we're talking, you should see in his face. He just got a grumpy face.
We could just talk. I mean, that works for me.
That is too. We're some of the most yappy SOBs I've ever met in my life, especially when we get around each other. But yeah, guys. If you have any questions, concerns, obviously get a hold of us and we will get things straightened out and we will try and make it a better program for you guys as well as for us. So again, guys, thanks for stopping by and we will talk to you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.
If you're interested in keeping up to date with new episodes on our channel, add us on any of your favorite podcasting apps or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Seriously Pointless Conversations. If you have questions or concerns, please email us at seriouslypointlessconvo@gmail.com. We appreciate any feedback. Thank you for listening to our show.